right, we're going to jump into it. So here I'm going to give just a very brief background on myself and the firm, just so you have some context. So my name's Arjun Arora. I'm from San Francisco and work in the SF office of 500 startups. I've started a couple of companies and have done a lot of investing and advising personally, and then more recently with 500 startups as well. So on a personal level, invested or advised in companies like AngelList, Change.org, Lyft, Cloudability, and a handful of others. And then I've seen either directly or indirectly tens of millions of dollars of capital raised. So like all things, I think there is both an art and a science to the to fundraising, and so excited to chat with you all about that today. So the goal of this presentation is to help you think through how to quickly raise money at the early stage for your startup from the best, right? So how can you find the best investors for you that are values and vision aligned and raise that money quickly? And we're going to walk through kind of the process and the psychology and the mentality of fundraising here in this presentation today. So that's what we're going to do. And in a little shout out to DJ Khaled, these are the major keys, and we're going to walk through them. So here we go. Here's what's important. Really, really important to spend the time to get prepared and then run a tight process. A lot of times people are fundraising haphazardly. They're kind of, oh, I'm going to raise this month and then I'm not raising next month. And this particularly happens when you have some traction and you have some revenue and you don't need the money right away. What happens often is that people don't run a tight process. And when you don't run a tight process, it can create all kinds of distractions in the business. So one of the most important things is thinking about preparation, putting all the things together initially, and then running this really tight process. And so when you do that, you want to focus 100% on the fundraising process. I know a lot of founders will end up, like I was saying before, will spend kind of 50% of their time on fundraising, 50% dealing with fires. This is a great opportunity to practice delegation. So thinking about delegating out the core parts of your business that you don't need to be focused on day to day, and then really, really honing in on fundraising. And I know for founders, you're always working 200%, right? So 100% of your time on fundraising. And of course, you'll need to spend some time still making sure the business is running, but really you want to be hyper dedicated to the process of fundraising. The next thing is create momentum. So create momentum by going deep in your network first, where you have relationships, where you have depth of relationships, and then go broad. Then go out to the larger network, go to the second degree network, and get the rest of the folks there. So you can often find a lot of traction early by going to folks that you know well, or your local regional ecosystem, your local investors, people that are friends, family, former bosses, things like that, where you can start, and then go broad. Because momentum begets momentum in fundraising, and it's really important to keep focusing on that. So the next thing is creating FOMO, right? So how many of you know what FOMO is? Maybe just to get a quick sense of it. So it's the fear of missing out. And so there's the concept of social proof. It's all about creating FOMO, particularly as you're getting and building that momentum. The last half of your fundraising is typically much, much easier than the first half. The first 20% is typically the hardest, and then as things roll along, it becomes much easier. And the biggest piece you're trying to leverage is the fear of missing out. You're going to be the next huge company in the region. You're going to be the next huge company globally. Oh, I saw this opportunity. I missed it. That's a bummer. I don't want to be that person. So investors are driven by this psychology, frankly, all the time. So leverage it and use it to your advantage. So create the FOMO, and we'll talk about tactical ways of how to do it shortly. And then lastly, most importantly, close the round quickly and get back to work, right? Fundraising is not something you should be doing always. It should be something that you're doing in focused, kind of specific areas of time. And then the idea is to take the capital and start deploying it. So I see a lot of folks will kind of drag the process on, and this kind of keeps going back to the first point. But close it quickly, round it up, make it efficient, everything from the little pieces, and then get back to work. And so back to building the company. And a lot of really liked a lot of what Mark shared earlier, just around thinking deeply about values and alignment around that. So this is, I think, an important piece to keep in mind as you think about the whole process. So let's start talking about the first piece. So that was kind of an outline, what we're going to talk through, how the fundraising process works, in my mind, best, and then let's talk a little bit about specifics. So first thing, get prepared. All right, so I know, this will vary, and this is kind of a heads up that this is a US-centric or Silicon Valley-centric approach in some ways, but the overarching principles are applicable anywhere in the world. So there's a convertible note that you want to get together, and particularly at the early stage, you want to set the terms. You want to be the one who says, this is what we're raising at, as long as it's not too astronomical, if it's within the right band. It's typically better if you as the founder set the terms. Then it's about creating a paragraph, really synthesizing what your company stands for and getting that tight in a paragraph that's easily forwardable and shareable. The next piece is creating the deck. So let's walk through each of these pieces in more detail. So the crystal clear 1 to 2 paragraph blurb on your company. This is something that investors can get and read, ideally on their mobile device. It's something that the majority of investors are reading things quickly, running in between meetings, and so you want to have something that's specific, synthesized, and really tight. And this takes iteration. It takes time to get this right. You can't just type up the first paragraph that comes to mind and start throwing it out to investors. Go to your mentors, go to your other early investors, other folks, and really get this paragraph clean. And what you want to capture in this is the size of the market, the team, the product, and the market that you're playing in generally. So you want to capture all of those things and get it into this tight paragraph. And then any traction that you have already. Get people excited about taking the meeting. It doesn't have to be super comprehensive, but it has to pique people's interest. And so that's what's important about the paragraph. The next piece is a beautiful 10 to 12 page deck. This is kind of an endless perennial debate, at least in Silicon Valley, is do you include the deck with the introduction email? I'm partial to it. I think that it's valuable. Again, as long as you're focused on creating interest through the deck, pique people's interest. And the main things you want to cover are team, product, market, traction. There's a whole host of others. There's lots of content you can find online on how to create the right deck. But you want to capture at least these main pieces. And you don't have to give away the farm. I've talked to a lot of founders who are very particular about, well, I don't know, is it trade secrets? I don't know if I want to share this. It might get forwarded around. So in that case, I would recommend using a solution like DocSend or something else where you can control who sees the deck, and then if someone you don't want to see the deck sees it, you can kind of shut off their access. Or you can pull the link. For those who may be concerned about proprietary information, use DocSend, use another kind of way to share the information, but do get it out there. The next thing, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, is around setting the terms. I know in the region there's different versions of convertible note, KISS, and this was back to an earlier presentation from this morning around being a Delaware C Corp certainly helps. There's tools like Stripe Atlas, so you can create that entity relatively quickly, which is important as well. But again, that's not necessarily true for everybody, but if it is, then I highly recommend any of these kind of convertible notes, say for the KISS documents, to make it really, really easy and make it so it's something that investors have seen. And so you're not spending a lot of time negotiating terms. Everyone knows what it is. They're taking high risk. It's early, and they can get it done. So that's important. So I'd think about how to craft that note and set the terms. There's a much longer discussion around how to set the terms depending on the region you're in, depending on the valuation, depending on your traction. But we can save that discussion for later. But for now, the idea is set your terms, have that discussion, put it into a document that's easy, use a solution like HelloSign, DocuSign, something that has a template so that you can just crank it out quickly, right? This is all about making this process as efficient as possible and time gating it so that you can get it done fast. And by using a solution like DocuSign or HelloSign, you're able to, the minute someone says, yes, I'm in, awesome. Now you can just crank out the template, put in their information, and get it out and close the deal. So have your wiring instructions and other things ready as well. I know, again, in some places this is more complicated than others, but the meta lesson from all of this is remove as much friction as possible from the getting things signed and getting the money wired. All right, so we talked about a lot of the materials that you'll need and the content that you'll need to have ready before you kick off an actual fundraising process. Now let's start talking about researching your targets, researching the investors that you want to reach out to. Who are the right investors for you, and what do they look like? Where do they hang out? Where do they live? Do your research, understand those investors. What are they invested in? Are they active? Are they not? All of those things. All right, so it's about creating your target list, right? And It's about effectively you're putting together a CRM system. I mean, really, this is a CRM for the specific purposes of fundraising, and you want to get the right column headers together, basically. So you want, name, are they an angel or a VC? Again, we're talking about early stage fundraising here. We're not talking about a Series A or Series B. We're talking about kind of pre-seed and seed rounds for companies that are either have gotten started, have a little bit of traction, or have meaningful traction and are now, moving towards the A. The fund, if there's a fund, are they active or not? Particularly with the angels, you can end up wasting a lot of cycles by going after angels who may have invested, they may have done one or two deals 2 years ago, and they're showing up on all the, all the lists because maybe they had one successful, exit. But you want to make sure that you're really focusing on folks who are active right now. Then look at relevant investments. I've made thousands of requests for introductions, emails, and send those across. And what I often find is, there's competition, there's companies that are clearly competitive, there's companies that are relevant and not relevant, there's investors who are only focused on ad tech, and if you're a marketplaces business or an e-commerce business, they're just not going to invest. So don't waste your resources nor the resources of your network in getting access to those folks. And then the last piece, this is really important, find the best refer from within your network. Right? You're here at conferences like this, you're meeting great people, you're active in your ecosystem, you're out networking, you're connecting. So you probably know people that can refer you to the investors that you want to meet in your region or globally. So find the best referrer, who's going to give you that strongest reference, and who has the best relationship with that end angel or investor as well. So make sure you're logging that down. And this information is a little harder to find. It's not always as obvious, but there's ways to get at it. You can look at LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter and figure out if there's mutual connections and what those depth of those connections are. So do a little research there, find the best referrer. So now this can look like 100, it can look like 200. In some cases, it can look like a few hundred, just depending on who's the right fit for you, what you're going after, who are the angels in your ecosystem. So do the work, put this together. It will save you so much time down the road. All right, so now you've got your materials together, you've got your target list together, and you know who you're reaching out to. So next step is to focus on your first degree connections, right? And this is a crazy, crazy graph. This is a social graph of somebody. So let's say, you're somewhere here in the middle, right over there, and maybe up top is your region. Maybe somebody who's up in this area is where all your investor friends hang out, right? So people tend to clump together. And what you want to do is you want to go after your first degree connections that have access to lots of other investor types, right? So you're looking at who they're connected to, and the value of this is that you're creating social proof. So if you're looking at, you have to prioritize all of your, social connections. Let's say a few hundred folks or a few thousand folks. You have to be focused on who are the people I'm reaching out to, and more importantly, having some depth of understanding of who they know and the influence that they have in helping you to create FOMO and helping you to push your deal along. Okay, so now you're focused on your first degree connections. You're going out to the people you've worked with who are angel investors who've actively made investments. And so you've done that first kind of tranche of outreach. And so you're going out, you're reaching out with the blurb, you're reaching out with the deck, you say, hey, remember me, I used to work for you 2 jobs ago, or I'm your cousin's best friend, or whatever it is. You can find a lot of those relationships and then start reaching out with, same thing, the blurb, the deck, say, hey, I'd love to grab half an hour to sit down and chat through what we're working on. And these are friendly relationships, so you may even be asking for advice or money, but you want to kick off the process. All right, so that's your first degree connections. Now you're going to go to your second degree connections. Again, I mentioned this presentation is a bit Silicon Valley centric, but these are the tools and solutions you can use to figure out who those folks are, and this is what you're using in that research period as well. So AngelList, Crunchbase, LinkedIn, Facebook is probably relevant, Twitter is relevant, and any other kind of local social networks. But understand what the right second degree connections are, and then start reaching out to them. So the best way to reach out to your second degree connections is this. It's the request for introduction email. I know this is really hard to read, and I apologize. I'll walk through what each of these arrows are. But the essence of it is you're asking your connection, who knows, let's say, a notable investor, for a request for introduction. And the reason of this, as I mentioned earlier, is it's all about making it easy and making the process as seamless as possible. Now, the referrer is going to go out of their way to help introduce you to a lot of different people that are in their network that they have a trusted relationship with. So make it easy for them. And if they're a super node, if they're somebody who gets a lot of these requests, they're probably inundated with email. They're probably super busy. They're probably always just getting pinged on all kinds of different channels. So make their life as easy as possible. All right, so let's walk through this request for introduction in particular, and what are the key parts of it. Okay, so hey Arjun, we'd love to present to Visionary Ventures. All right, so they're very clear about what who they're reaching out to. This is what we're working on. And what I really like about this is they're saying, given Visionaire's focus on visionary ideas and one of their investors' advisory role in SoftBank, so they're giving some context on why this makes sense. This shows that they've done the work. It shows that they've done the research, and they know why this fund or why this person, this can be applicable for angel investors as well, is of interest, right? And why they're a fit for the startup that they're working on. Then it's a quick summary, so it's something that's relatively short, but it gets at the opportunity, right? We've got all these organizations, independent news networks. They're talking about a lot of the different things that make this a big opportunity and make this exciting. And then the last part is the deck, right? So it's a link to the deck, and as I mentioned before, they're using DocSend here, so they can actually track whether or not someone's opened the deck, whether they've reviewed it, what pages they're spending a lot of time on. One of the things that DocSend did a really interesting study, and they said that people, on average, investors will spend roughly 2 minutes and 33 seconds, I think it was, on your deck. So you have 2 minutes and 33 seconds to capture an investor's attention and get them excited about taking a meeting. And I think even nowadays, that might even be on the longer side. It may actually even be shorter than that. So the DocSend link helps you track the time people are spending on it. The other thing that's valuable about it is it'll help you understand where people are focusing their attention. So if your deck, you've got your market, you've got your team, your traction, your product. If an investor is spending all their time focused in on the product side, either they're very interested in that or maybe they have questions around that. So you can learn a lot from the data exhaust of how people are looking at your deck. So highly recommend tools like that. There's others as well. It's not just DocSend, but that's one way to do it. So these are the ways you'd craft that note. And then what you do is you send out 10, 15, 5, depending on who your introducers are of these notes, and send them out individually, one by one. And now what you can do is all of a sudden they'll start shooting these out. And as they're getting replies, say, yeah, this looks really interesting. I'd love to take a meeting. Now they can introduce you indirectly. They're interested, and it's going to move your process along much, much faster. Rather than sitting there waiting to say, oh, is this going to happen or not? I don't know. Should I keep following up? They're typically going to have that level of trust. And if they say no, it's okay also, right? If they say no, then it's fine. Then you can move on, and you can move on to the next thing. All right, so that's the request for introduction email. So you've sent out you put your materials together, you've done your research, you've reached out to your first degree network. Hopefully a couple of those folks have closed now. And now you're reaching out to your second degree network through this request for introduction methodology, right? And now hopefully you're in front of lots and lots of people. And they typically say it takes 100 plus meetings to close your early stage rounds of financing. So now it's time to pitch. All right, so now you got to get in front of all of these investors. Hopefully your first degree meetings are relatively easy. You're not having to, they're people that there's already that trust that's been built, so it's not too stressful. But you're still asking for money. You're still asking them to commit to your startup and to your vision. And so, that's still challenging. But where the real action comes is the folks that you're meeting, that are the second degree or the third degree, and you're meeting for the first time these angel investors. So that's maybe you'll get the pleasure of pitching Dave McClure one day, but this is what the pitch meeting is. And so in the pitch meeting, you want to lead that meeting. As the founder, as the entrepreneur, you want to be the one who's in charge of that meeting, who's taking lead in that meeting. And what that means is you're setting the agenda. You're either saying, hey, in this meeting, I'm going to walk you through my deck. That'll take 3 to 5 minutes. Please stop me for questions if you have them. And then we're going to have a discussion on anything you want, and we'd love to chat further. So you want to step into that room with confidence, and you want to step into that room and lead the meeting. That's really, really critical. Oftentimes what happens is founders will just kind of lean back and assume that someone's read it. They'll kind of say, oh, what questions do you have for me? and they'll kind of let the investor lead the conversation. You want to make sure you're pitching. So that's really important. And the next thing is just ask, make sure that you're very, very clear about next steps at the end of the meeting. So let's say you have a good discussion, you have a conversation. The other thing that's important is that you make sure you ask the investor, what are they looking for? What are they interested in? Does this fit their thesis? How do they help their founders? How do they help their startups? What have they done in the past, right? You want to be asking them as many questions as they're asking you. And Mark mentioned this earlier in his presentation was, you want to have that alignment on both values and the vision with the investors you have. And sometimes you have to turn down investors as well. So make sure that you're asking them questions as well. And the best investors will really appreciate that and respect that. So make sure that you're having a dialogue and it's a conversation, because it really is a partnership. And God willing, everything goes well, you're with these investors for 7 years. You're with them for a long time. And so you want to make sure that you're asking them as many questions as they're asking you. All right, so now you've gone through the pitch. That's all good. Now you're starting to get commitments, right? You're starting to get people in, and you're starting to get your first tranche of investors that have committed. They've signed the paperwork on HelloSign or DocuSign. They've maybe even wired the money if it's a convertible note. And now you want to start creating FOMO. You want to reach back out to all the folks in the beginning who may or may not have responded, or they said, hey, let me see when things are moving forward. I don't know if I want to invest. It's not a hard no, but it's not a yes either. So now's where you can reach back out to them and say, oh, here's an update on the business. And by the way, here are the 6 people that are in. And by the way, one of them really well. So go ask them why they invested and why they're excited about it. So make sure that as you're fundraising and as you're moving along, you're building this list, you're building this FOMO. And what it does is it gets people excited. Oh my God, maybe this is the next big opportunity. Look at all these people investing. Look at all these great folks involved. And so you can leverage that to get things going. It's often one of the analogies that I've heard used. It's like inviting people to a party. Oh, he's coming. Oh, she's coming. Oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be a fun party, right? So create that FOMO and get folks in the door. All right, and then the last piece is really, and I want to make sure we leave at least 5 minutes to questions. Close it up fast and get back to work, right? And this goes back to getting the pieces together so that you can do that. If you're using a convertible note and you have clear wiring instructions, the closing of this should either be a rolling close or it should be something that you can snap together and get done pretty quickly. All right, so I know we've talked about a lot of different things, but just to kind of sum it all up, you want to make sure that you start by understanding that it's going to be a process and you have to be fully committed to it. You need to put your materials together, do the work, practice your pitch, get the paragraph tight, get all the pieces together, get the convertible note, get the terms, get everything set up so that you're ready to move as quickly as possible. Do your research. Find the right first-degree connections, the right second-degree connections, and look at the folks that are active in the space. Look at the folks that have done investments that are relevant to your space, and then craft that request for introduction email, get that tight, get it clean. Now start the process, pitch, create FOMO as things start coming together, and close it up fast and get back to work. So that's how you run a really tight and efficient process. And if you do that well, if you do the preparation part of it well, you can get this done, again, depends on the region, depends on the ecosystem, but in as little as kind of 2 months. So again, if you do your preparation work up front, can run through this process really quickly. It typically takes 100 meetings. This is, again, not a hard and fast rule, but about 100 meetings to get these early rounds of financing together, depending on where you are. All right, so again, Arjun Arora, you can find me on Twitter here, and now would love to answer questions. We've got looks like about 5 minutes left. Please.
Can you tell us how effective is cold emailing?
Yeah, great question. Cold emailing is relatively ineffective. It can work. I'll tell a funny story. My brother has a company as well. He cold emailed Johnny Ive from Apple, and he responded. That rarely happens, right? That rarely happens, and I have to shake him sometimes and be like, that's not normal. You have to understand this isn't normal that people respond to you like that. But it does work, and I think when it does work, it's about really doing your research. spending the time to deeply understand that person. Nowadays with social media, people leave a kind of a data exhaust everywhere. So you can understand, particularly people like Johnny Ive, they've been written about. But even run-of-the-mill angel investors have a lot of information. So do the work, show that you're thoughtful, show why you think it's a fit, and ideally get a warm introduction. But if you can't, then go the cold route.
So I have one more question related to this. How often should one follow up? Because when you start the emailing conversation, sometimes it dies down, and then you follow up, and then it dies down again. So how often should we ping the investors?
Yeah. So if they're not responding, you probably want to follow up maybe once or twice, and ideally with value-added information. So don't just follow up and say, hey, just following up, can I get 15 minutes? Say, hey, I'm following up, and this has happened in my business, or this investor is also invested, and I see, so continue that level of personalization, that value creation. That's really important. Now, if you've had email exchange with them, and it's not completely cold, and then they've gone cold, you can often send an email, and I like this language a lot, which is, hey, I would request the professional courtesy of your reply. We're closing the fundraising process, or the process is moving along. And it's totally fine if it's not a fit, but I just want to know so that I can close the file and I can make sure that I can move on. And a simple yes or no is fine. I've even seen some people take this and they get funny with it as well. Say one, or please, just all I need is one letter from you. A, I'm still interested. B, no. C, I've been eaten by an alligator. Right? You can make it funny too. And so if you want, and if that's your style and that's your values, you can do something clever like that.
And sorry, just one last question.
Sure.
Is there any time limitation to the follow-up and everything? Or you can shoot an email whenever, like an year later when you have updates?
Yeah, I like the pace of, if you're actively in the middle of a fundraising process, then I think the pace of every 7 to 10 days is good. I think if you're in I just want to build a warm relationship with an investor, then once a month is appropriate. But if the fundraising is closing together, then is coming together, then you want to be, you can be relatively active about it. But if you're following up every day, it's not going to be valuable. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Yes.
How do you raise international funding if you're from an emerging market like Pakistan?
Yeah.
And your product is like global.
Yeah. So if your product is global and you're truly going after a global market, then I think again, I'm from the Silicon Valley ecosystem. I think, it makes sense to come out there. So, do what you can to be either a part of an accelerator program or incubator, or just physically get up and move there. I think if that's not possible, then you have to just start building traction in your region. And eventually, if it is truly global and you start to see users from all over, you'll hopefully catch the attention of someone that can help, bring you over to Silicon Valley. And again, this is a very partial view, but that's where I think if you're building a truly global tech company, I'm a strong believer in being in Silicon Valley. Yeah.
As an investor, why is it that this whole process has become about the entrepreneur having to prove their point without the benefit of a doubt?
Yeah.
What about the side about the investor being savvy enough to recognize and see something, see a startup, see the product or the service that they're offering, and be able to evaluate, analyze, and see the potential of that startup and go, well, you know what? With just a few things that you've told us, we know this is going to be successful. What about that side?
Yeah, that happens as well. So I think as the best investors can see a company, see a product, and say, this is awesome, this is going to be a hit, I want to get involved. And so they're actively or proactively reaching out. And I think if you're running a process that, tightly, you're looking to basically create that environment for investors to say, I see it, I get it, this makes sense. And the best investors will move very quickly. They're not going to spend, maybe they'll need to talk to their partnership if it's a fund. The best angel investors will typically invest, within 24 hours to 48 hours afterwards. So they'll do a little bit of diligence, they'll send some emails to some friends, and they'll say, all right, I'm ready to go. So I think maybe it's a function of the right investor set, maybe it's a function of the ecosystem or seeing enough volume of deals. But the best investors are both proactive and they make decisions, particularly at the early stage, relatively quickly. So you want to look, in part of your research phase, you want to look for folks like that. All right, I'm out of time, but I'm happy to answer questions. I'll be out and about, and I'm here till through Monday. So happy to answer any questions later around fundraising or anything else. But thank you everyone for your attention, and thanks Startup Istanbul for having me. So really appreciate it. Thank you.